As you know, I've been closely following the fallout from the scandal over Phillip Schofield's affair with a much younger colleague. Usually, ITV bosses are behind the camera, but this week all eyes were on them at Parliament's CMS Select Committee. Holly Willoughby's return this week was marked and there was scrutiny over comments made by this morning's editor.
I suppose I should ask, first of all, are you okay?
Am I okay?
Yes.
Yes, I'm fine, thank you.
Because I know that's the question du jour at this morning. Now, we all saw yesterday that surreal performance by the editor of the programme, who, when he was being asked by a reporter from Sky about bullying on the programme, started talking about aubergines.
We take these issues very seriously.
But what about what he said?
I wouldn't endorse what he said. In fact,
you agree it's bizarre.
I wouldn't use that word.
What word would you use?
I'd certainly say it was extremely ill-judged.
So, in case you missed it, this is where the aubergine line came from.
Is there a toxic work environment at this morning?
I'll tell you what's toxic. I've always found toxic. Is aubergine. Do you like aubergine? Do you?
Is there a toxic work environment?
But do you like aubergine? Because I don't like aubergine. It's just a personal thing.
The head of the committee, Dame Caroline Dinenage, has hauled in ITV CEO for questioning next week over working practices at ITV. She joins me now for her first interview since the hearing, and Quentin and Kevin are also, sadly, still with us. Caroline, you said last week... Oh, first of all, are you okay?
Yeah? I am. I'm great. I'm really pleased to see you.
Just make sure everyone's okay. So, Caroline, you said quite clearly last week that last week's hearing was not going to be about this morning, that it was a wider hearing to discuss much wider issues. And yet, John Nicholson took over and kind of showboated and focused it down onto this morning, which I found, given your comments at the beginning, slightly disrespectful. It was your first outing as the committee chair. And do you think he'd have done that if you were a man?
Well, I don't know. I mean, he did go off-piste a little bit, but in some ways, I have to say, it did slightly lend itself to the arguments that I'd been making with ITV in order to attract Dame Carolyn McCall in to come and have an independent meeting with us, separate from that one. The one on Tuesday was very much about the draft media bill, and I didn't want it hijacked, as you say. But actually, when I was trying to persuade them to have this separate meeting, I said, look, if we don't have this separate meeting, then it's very likely that the whole thing will be dominated by the discussion over the disasters that have been happening at this morning.
And it did?
And it did slightly, but the vast majority of the meeting was on the draft media bill, which is important. You know, we're doing the pre-leg scrutiny. It's a legislative role, and it's important we get it right. So I didn't want the whole thing to be dominated, which it would have been otherwise. So I think he almost made my point for me, that it was very difficult to keep, when you've got ITV officials in front of you and you've got such a big high profile story, to keep on the straight and narrow. It's very tempting.
So the letter Dame Carolyn wrote to you really asked more questions than it answered. Was she reluctant to come in? Did you have to persuade her? Was there much kind of like arm bending?
Yes, so the letter, I think, was supposed to make us feel confident that they've got this independent barrister-led inquiry and that there was nothing more to see here. And as you say, Nadine, I think it did almost pose more questions than it answered, in the sense that it didn't set out any of the terms of reference of this inquiry, any of the timescales. It gave
you no information whatsoever.
It gave us no information, and that's why I felt that we did have to have this separate meeting with Dame Carolyn. And initially there was, of course, a little bit of reluctance to do that, but I think ITV appreciated.
But why was there the reluctance? Because what we heard, I think we discussed this maybe last week, was that she was sending someone in her place. And now, thankfully, you've got her to go. I don't think she can refuse to go. But was there reluctance? Is that true? Was she sending someone in her place?
So I think she was initially hoping that the chat we were going to have with Magnus Brooks this week, which when he came in for the draft media bill, would be sufficient, and that would deal with the issue. But it would have dominated, and it's not fair. So it was really important that we had a separate one with her. We've got a lot of questions, and it's not I'm not interested in a witch hunt. I'm not really actually interested very much in the Phillip Schofield issue, and I think that's been discussed to death by everybody. What I'm interested in are what are the systems and processes at ITV and in fact other public service broadcasters to ensure that these giants, these gods of broadcasting, if you like, don't have undue influence over the careers and lives of other young members of staff. What are the safeguarding?
Caroline, this is the only point, I think, the only point at which you and I would disagree on this. You're absolutely right about these gods, these celebrities who use that power. We saw that in, bizarrely, I wrote in my column a few weeks ago, the parallel between the morning show with Jennifer Aniston, and it was almost as though, real life was imitating art. It was quite bizarre. And I agree with you over the workplace practices and the power that they have and making sure the processes are in place. But we do know that, and I know you don't want to do a witch hunt, and it's all been said, but behaviour on this morning's set between Phillip Schofield and his much younger colleague was at best inappropriate. And so are you saying you're not going to ask questions about what happened?
Well, I'm sure it will come up. You've seen my committee. You've been before my committee. You know that they will leave no stone unturned. But I think more broadly, I want to really shine a light on some of the bigger issues that this has identified, this whole situation, and what are the lessons that can be learned and what other public service broadcasters need to be looking at as well in terms of safeguarding the duty of care for their staff, in terms of things like whistleblowing. We know in this case that on more than one occasion, members of staff drew this to the attention of bosses at ITV, and I don't think sufficient support was in place.
They were drawing attention to the inappropriate behaviour.
They were.
So, and it was ignored.
Right.
And so that in itself, actually, although, again, you don't want to talk about the Phillip Schofield, that brings, I think sometimes it takes a case. ITV have been through a difficult time, and I've had to deal with them during the, when Caroline Flack took her own life, and there have been other issues. And I've always given them the benefit of the doubt. And I think this brings it to a point where sometimes you have to use a case and use that case as the vehicle to make the point. And I think that's where you are now. You are at that point where ITV have to be held to account. And I think it's your committee that's going to do it.
Yeah, well, it's no pressure then, thanks. Yeah. But we do have a lot of questions to ask. My fear is that they will hide behind this independent barrister-led inquiry that they've called for and not answer the questions. And that to me, I think, would be a really bad approach. It would be an arrogant approach, and I think it would be disrespectful to.
And are you going to ask for a time frame on the inquiry?
Yeah, we want a time frame. We want to know what the terms of reference are, and I want to know. There's three key areas I'm interested in. One is the duty of care to staff. What protections there are in place, systems and processes. What about the whistleblowers? Where what's the framework for that? How can people draw attention to worries and know that their concerns will be listened to? And thirdly, I'm really interested in the whole concept of non-disclosure agreements where the money changed hands.
That's very
and
important.
How these are potentially stopping people from being able to tell their stories and raise their concerns.
And the basis upon which these NDAs are signed. Some of them are signed hugely for no purpose whatsoever, but people sign them because they're so desperate for the job. And then when they experience inappropriate behaviour or something which absolutely shouldn't happen, their hands are tied, they can't even report it.
Exactly, and we've seen it from a number of ITV programmes. I've been contacted since we started this work by a number of people that have appeared on the X Factor, a whole range of programmes. And so, that's another real focus for our committee as well.
So, Caroline, it sounds to me like you've got it sorted. I have every confidence in you. Can I just say you are 1,000,000% improvement on the previous chair of that select committee? They are not the easiest committee. I wish you the best of luck, but it seems to me like you've got it sorted. So, Caroline, someone who doubted you is actually sitting right next to you, and I had to fight your corner very hard last week. And I will just say that Dame Caroline is one of the smartest cookies that I know. But we'll just have a look at a rewind to the clip that happened last week.
She's not the brightest bulb, but good luck to her.
Quentin, excuse me.
She's not. I've sketched her.
She was a minister in my department.
I know.
Caroline worked on the online safety bill for 2 years. She was a health minister for 3 years before that, who helped to launch the women's health strategy. I actually think she's an incredibly smart cookie.
Who's that fat old harumpher?
So what would you like
Go on, Ivan, go on, you got a free
What would you
shot.
like to say about Quentin, Caroline?
Well, first of all,
Apart
I'd like to say I'm really pleased to have you in my corner. I'd hate to have you on the other opposite side. Look, Quentin and I have previous. I know he probably won't thank me for saying this, but he comes from a generation of men who, and you know, in his role, he very much writes about what women look like and what men say. And him and I fell out about this in my very first appearance at the Dispatch Box when I was a minister. I don't think he's ever quite forgiven me for it. And
I told you she was smart.
The thing is, look, the role of a minister, the role of an MP is very often judged by what we do at the Dispatch Box. But you know yourself, that is a tiny fraction of the role. And actually, very many women would be put off of a career in politics by the words of men like Quentin, who talk about what women look like and keep disparaging them. And actually, I think that women have the sort of skills that you need in the political world in abundance, the ability to listen, the ability to get things done, the ability to empathise, the ability to multitask. And yet, by undermining us, he does us a disservice because he puts other very brilliant women off of getting involved. I know I'm not an Oxbridge graduate, neither are you, but I may not be the best person at the Dispatch Box, I'm probably not the best person on TV, but the fact is, I know that I have skills that make a difference in the political world. I know that I can change lives, and I know that I can change the world for people in my own small little way, and that by having been an MP, I've made a difference. And you know, and I want to be able to continue to do that.
Beautifully put. How many urgent questions did you ask on the trot? Answer on the trot?
I went, when I was a health minister, I went for 10 consecutive working days where I had at least one UQ tabled against me every single day.
That is the hardest job to do at the Dispatch Box, and you did it continuously.
I am an equal opportunities taker. And it's quite wrong, by the way, quite wrong to say that I don't refer to the appearance of blokes, because what sketch writers do is we are verbal cartoonists. And so a cartoonist in the newspaper or a magazine will alight on a particular feature, normally visual, because that's the artistic medium of the politician, and will exaggerate that. And that's what you do as a sketch writer. So I am completely blind on gender when it comes to being rude about people. I try to be every bit as rude about blokes as I do about women. And so, I mean, I thought you had one or two lamentable outings at the Dispatch Box.
So which is the tiniest part of our job. So you just basically rude about everyone then, Quentin?
But it's the part of the job that I am employed to do.
So, Kevin.
To look at.
What do you think?
Me? Oh
What
my
do you
God.
have to
He's just been told and he's fighting back. I think it's great. I mean, ding, ding, round 7, please. I mean,
I didn't go to Oxford. I went to Trinity College, Dublin.
I have to say, though, just very quickly, as if to make my point, that after Quentin and I had our conversation about my first outing at the Dispatch Box, and I explained that I felt it had been a little bit misogynistic, as if to make my point, the following day he wrote a piece about how it's outrageous that this fake blonde, overly tanned Caroline Dinenage came and told me off for being a misogynist. In other news, that same day, the international human rights lawyer Amal Clooney turned up at the House of Commons, and she was wearing a dress that was far too short, and as if to make my point.
Well, I've always been most worried.
Okay, guys, we have to.
I described
No, I'm giving the last word to Caroline.
I described the theatre.
Thank you, Caroline. You have the last word.